I'm Meha Murthy. I'm a junior in interactive media and game design. And I'm here to talk about games, education, and educational games, or as some people like to call it, edutamication games. So, play. What do we mean as game designers when we discuss the aspect of play? If you ask like the average person, they might say play is what you do when you're having fun, because besides the long-winded analysis and arguments on what fun is, it doesn't fully encapsulate what play is. Play is basically engagement. We play when engaging with the system. We play instruments by engaging with music. We play sports by engaging with its rules and other players. And we play games by engaging with the set of mechanics that govern its world. When designing an educational game, we want the audience to play and engage with it, to explore its mechanics, to discover its properties. Then why do so many so-called educational games fail at this? So it sounds pretty simple. We hear the phrase to gamify thrown around a lot. It's the act of finding the fun in otherwise mundane or difficult work. Maybe as a kid, you've been told that if you did your homework on time, you get like a gold star, or that in order to like win at chores, you'd have to vacuum the house before dinner. Neither of these things, or neither of these examples make the work you're doing actually fun. It simply gives you an extrinsic reward for tolerating it. So the phrase chocolate covered broccoli is often used in academia discussing educational games. It refers to how many of these games are basically quizzes disguised as something fun by wrapping it in like this wild narrative or brightly colored art. So instead of like solve 9 plus 3, it'd be something like solve 9 plus 3 to defeat the zombie. This method of design separates the mechanics of the game from the educational material itself, and thus we get this chocolate-covered broccoli. These are just quizzes with fluff added to them, yet this is the most common way educational games are made. In order to make a well-designed experience that actually teaches the player, the mechanics of the game itself must intrinsically allow the player to learn and explore the concept. Learning shouldn't feel like an obstacle to overcome, rather it must be viewed as a tool to solve obstacles. This is much easier said than done, but when done correctly, can be a powerful tool in the field of education. So games are inherently educational. Every single game teaches the audience something, whether it's a new way to use mechanics, how to find the most efficient way to win, or the ability to discover new environments. Games not only teach an audience a concept, but challenge them to master it. And education can be inherently fun. It's fun to learn how to like ride a bike or master some coding problem. You don't need to sugarcoat how the circulatory system works. It can be fun all on its own, but we can design certain rules, limitations, and challenges to increase player engagement. So how can we do this? What specific design aspects facilitate learning and keeps players engaged? Well, game design isn't like a single formula that takes you to the correct answer. It's a process that guides us to hit the experience goals we're trying to achieve. But there are some methods we can use to achieve this. Firstly, we can ensure that our finished game will actually be fun through prototyping. By stripping away all the extraneous art, sound effects, narrative that wraps the core of the gameplay, we can clearly see mechanical flaws within our system. Paper prototypes are a great way to do this and will help you see the systems of your game at work. So what is a game system? Pictured here isn't actually a game system. It's like something in economics, I think, but I think it displays the point I'm trying to make really well. A system is a set of elements that are interconnected in a way that achieves some kind of purpose or behavior. A game system is a system whose purpose or behavior is being used to create that interactive experience. It's a series of relationships between the player or players and the rules that interconnect in such a way that allow for interesting decisions and give the ability to take strategic advantages. Good games allow you to take interesting actions and make interesting decisions. Simple games like Pyramid Solitaire, which is basically solitaire where you get to like add things or multiply things, or Monopoly contain math-based systems that let you use the rules of the game to your advantage. Now, designing good systems makes a good game, but what systems allow us to make a good educational game? So instead of thinking of the concept you're teaching as a problem your player must solve to overcome, think of the concept as the tools a player can use within the system. So here I have an example of a system within an interactive medium. Now, I wouldn't call this a game per se. It's more like a toy, and later I'll be explaining what a difference between a toy and a game is later, and how that affects how we learn and what that can do to an educational game. So let's let this load. I first found out this game in high school doing like AP biology. And although it isn't the most interesting or the best educational, again, toy that I've ever seen, it does demonstrate some concepts of what a system is. So what this is trying to show is how lac operons work within the body. So basically, if you're like lactose intolerant, this doesn't work right. I'm gonna make this faster. Whee. Okay. But it's demonstrating how different proteins are made that digest lactose, but if there's too much, the same lactose comes and inhibits itself. And then certain operons make different proteins that inhibit the lactose, but not itself. It's an interesting and complex system that if you read it in a textbook, you would get really confused as to what's going on. But the way you're able to like play around and turn off certain systems or like add lactose to the game and see how it actually works, or like see how different things that you can change the behavior and game state is like really informative and actually helps you understand what's going on better than it would if you like were listening to a lecture in class or like reading a book, even if there were like pictures. The interaction that you do as a player is valuable in and of itself. So again, this isn't, I wouldn't call this a game, but it's a step in the right direction of what we mean by creating game systems in order to educate people. I'm gonna exit out of this. And I'm gonna make sure my tabs aren't showing to everyone because you don't need to see my 40,000 tabs. So yeah, this is more of an interactive toy than a game, but it shows at the most basic level how simple rules within a game can affect one another depending on player input. So as you saw, adding the LAC-Z gene, the one on the left, plus its promoter makes enzymes that break down lactose, and the LAC-L gene makes proteins that block these enzymes, which are in turn made inactive with the presence of lactose. As you can tell, me just explaining that in words without like having like you yourself interacting with it probably seems a little more complicated, but see, like these systems have positive or negative feedback loops that influence the state of the game. So it's not a great game, but there's little player, because there's no like player agency and there's no interesting choices to be made, but it demonstrates how understanding these systems can make interactivity more fun and interesting. By playing around with these little mechanics, the audience is invited to alter and explore and influence the medium within the limitations to more deeply understand the core systems at play. So now that we have a system, or we know what a system is, and can enforce play within it, how do we make it a game? How do we keep the player engaged long term? All games require an element of interactivity. It gives the player agency to make decisions that can meaningfully affect the state of the game. We need to allow the player to make interesting choices and utilize strategy rather than elements like luck or regurgitating information to win. When a player makes a choice, it shouldn't be completely like black and white with a singular right answer. That's exactly what quizzes are. To teach effectively, the player must be able to explore multiple avenues, which can yield different results to arrive at a conclusion. So like 5 plus 2 is 7, yeah, but so is 9 plus 6 minus 1 divided by 2. And maybe that becomes more points. Maybe this ties into a larger system where more numbers are more points, but maybe they cost extra resources, but more points allow you to generate more resources. This way, players have to consider multiple aspects when making a choice, and each aspect can be tied to the core mechanic of the game, which in the example I just gave is like math and addition. In turn, this reinforces the concept of being taught. Having the player make relatively complex decisions encourages them to keep striving for the most efficient way to win or to maximize efficiency. There's a deep human need to master skill or to create these optimized systems. So basically, challenge excites us. But in order to create challenge, we need to have failure. Life is only worth living because we die at the end. Similarly, triumph and accomplishments are only felt when there's a chance you could fail. It's not fun to play a game you're cheating at, or like when you're in a situation where you're certain you'll win. Part of the fun of games comes from the aspect of failure. But failure in a game is much different than failure in an academic context. When you fail at a test, it drops your grade, which takes a toll on your self-worth. Often you're not really able to learn what you missed, and more importantly, why you missed them. Failure in games is subjective, natural, and part of the fun. Well-designed games make failure rewarding and interesting in its own way, encouraging players to try again. This ties to that decision-making process that we see in games and that they do all the time. When one fails at a game, instead of the thought, I hate failing, players start thinking, what choices can I make that could change my outcome? If the answer to this question is too obvious, just like a simple change in what button to click, this question becomes meaningless and irrelevant. You want the question to be more conceptual, where the answer itself lies in understanding and manipulating the overall concept rather than a single fact. In a quiz-based game, a player will mindlessly just click on all the answers until they reach the right one, learning basically nothing. So in a more involved game, once the player fails, they need to consider what series of choices they made that got them to this outcome. Failure in games is fun because there's an understanding that it's pretty much just a game. Without the stress of consequences, players are free to explore and take risks and try new avenues of thought they wouldn't consider in the real world. This aspect of low-stakes failure is also what delineates toys from traditional games. Toys are a medium in which there's no clear goal and is simply a space in which players experiment with a system or mechanic. So basically the lack operon example from earlier. To make a game, there needs to be a clear objective to work towards. The player must be able to visualize what it will be like when they accomplish this goal, and this fantasy is the driving factor in player engagement. However, we can take elements from building toys and apply it to making educational games. The freedom and low stakes of failure keeps players from becoming frustrated, but this needs to be balanced with an element of challenge and objectives to retain engagement and drive. Making an effective educational game requires it to keep a student's attention. If a student has the choice to like play a game or watch a movie or do literally anything other than play this game, the game you make needs to be able to win this battle of their attention because they're kids. It needs to be engaging enough for a student to play for an extended period of time, to want to come back and play again and again. Here we come to the topic of player motivation and drive. What makes audiences want to play again and again and again? There are two types of motivation we can give players, extrinsic and intrinsic. Extrinsic motivation comes from an external reward given as a prize for doing some kind of task, such as money or a grade or just simple validation from like parents or teachers. Intrinsic motivation comes from doing something simply because you find it meaningful to you. Intrinsic motivation has been shown to be far more rewarding, especially long-term, than extrinsic motivation. Making games intrinsically appealing means making them fun. In order to make an effective educational game, we need to tie the educational concept to the intrinsic motivator to get the players wanting to learn more, as opposed to them viewing the educational concepts as something to like push out of the way in order to get to the real gameplay. The goal of teaching should be to impart concepts on students as opposed to like a list of facts that they need to memorize. Games are especially good at teaching concepts, as it's a medium where the audience is forced to think critically about its subject from all different angles and in different contexts, as well as challenging a player to constantly reach to the next level of comprehension. A good example of conceptual knowledge can be seen in one of the first ever educational video games, the Oregon Trail. This game is meant to teach children about the Oregon Trail, like when it happened, like the specific years, what states it passed through, important landmarks and stuff like that. But if you've played this game, I can probably bet you don't remember many like hard facts about the Oregon Trail, besides probably the fact that you go to Oregon, but you probably don't remember like years and locations. But this game was valuable in teaching concepts like strategic foresight, saving and spending money, cost-benefit analysis, taking calculated risks, and resource management. These things are difficult to like give a simple quiz to see if kids were like better at planning ahead, but they do provide better critical thinking skills rather than like the rote memorization you often see in school, like younger grade schools and quizzes and tests like that. So with all these game design techniques in mind, let's apply this to a practical situation. We'll look at a good example of an educational game, and later, in my humble opinion, a terrible one. So here's a good example. Counting Kingdom is a great example of how to teach kids addition without sugarcoating concepts or seeming patronizing to the kids, while still being pretty fun for pretty much all ages. It plays a little similarly to a match 3 game, but with more strategy. Players need to add up numbers that are adjacent to each other in order to come up with the sum of one of the numbers on the left side of the screen to clear out the board of monsters. The numbers on the left can be combined to create bigger numbers to add up to. The more numbers you can add up, the more you clear out, thus incentivizing making the left numbers bigger, but at the same time making the math more challenging. This is a smart and elegant way to push students toward genuinely wanting to take on a challenge by offering them a higher reward and satisfaction of feeling cool about clearing out an entire board of monsters. As an additional bonus, there are these potions in the top left one can use that can subtract numbers from the monsters on the right, which subtly teaches the basics of subtraction as well. When playing, a child is presented with a myriad of options to approach the problem at hand. They can add up a few simple numbers they find, but the trade-off is that it only clears out a bit of the board. Or they can take on like a challenge and try to add up as many numbers to make a larger sum. Or they can decide that the specific number they want is out of reach and would try to experiment with the potions to see how this affects the game state. This system that offers multiple avenues of play, a constantly changing game state, and most importantly, has a series of risks and rewards that continue to engage the player to keep playing and challenging them to make the right move, makes this a really tight math game that's pretty fun for basically any age, not just like really young kids. Plus this little dude's really cute, so here is the game that made me see red when I first saw it. I was like in high school, and this game made me so mad and angry. It was part of a long series of games made by Rice University, like no shade if anyone like went there or anything has any affiliation, but there's a bunch of games that are meant to basically replace lab assignments for kids who like missed class that day or like need to graduate on time but couldn't take biology, or like right now I believe it's being used in COVID situations to replace the lab, which is like, okay, like what else are you going to do? You're not going to like ship chemicals to students' houses. But there's so much potential they could have followed, but I feel like it was very wasted. So yeah, it's meant to replace real in-class lab assignments. So it's supposed to be in lieu of that. So let's see how it stands up. I'm not even going to address the confusing UI and UX, the shoddily rendered flash animations, the grating compressed sound files, the extremely patronizing narrative, the multiple bugs, or the use of Comic Sans for every freaking piece of text. Purely game design wise, this game is lacking from both an entertainment standpoint and an educational one. So, oh my, this picture doesn't even work. That's how bad this game is. Okay, there's a picture here, so we're just gonna pretend it is. We start the game with a narrative exposition that sets up a situation. We haven't gotten to what subject we'll be learning about. It's basically a glorified book where you click the next button, and it's like just two characters who are like, man, I really love going to the store. Wow, there's like people here. That's crazy. And it's like 10 minutes of setting up this narrative exposition in Comic Sans that has nothing to do with what you're supposed to learn. And again, this is made for high schoolers, so this isn't even helping them in any way or like getting them in, I guess, the educational mood or something. So basically, yeah, that's how it starts. And then soon you get to the first, I guess, closest thing you could call the gameplay part, which in one of the games is a maze. Oh, fun fact, when I tried to look up screenshots for this game, like yesterday and the day before, the website was defunct, even though like last week it was fine. So I've been trying to scrounge around like the deep recesses of the internet for screenshots, but I could only find like bits of pieces of my examples with like like it's in the whole series, I would just choose one game or like a different game for different things. So the things you see might not exactly match up, but it's the same concept. So like in the game I was playing, there was this maze that took you 10 minutes that again had nothing to do with the concept, and you had to get this little robot to like the infirmary or something. And then whoa, okay, that's interesting. It's going backwards now. Cool. Okay, here we go. This is I had a maze, and when I was looking up like more of these mini games in the Medmis series, there was this one which I found so strange. I just wanted to share this with you guys because again, this is supposed to teach you about pathogens and how they affect the human body and like what their biology behind pathogens is. Do you think playing this game will help you learn what a pathogen is? The answer is no, and also it's just a strange concept to have in a game about biology. So I just wanted to share this screenshot. So they have basically these mini games that's either a maze or something like this. I think in one of them there was like a kind of Where's Waldo kind of deal where you had to like, find the missing pathogen. It's just like you have to click a pixel in a sea of other pixels. It's really strange. And again, this doesn't teach anything. Please go next. Let's see. These are also more from the pathogen game where it's like, which animal could the pathogen come from? But it's like a matching card game where you have like, just match the animals, and the one that you do last is the one that is. And it's like, okay, that also doesn't teach anything about the concept. But yet this is like a majority of the gameplay. Well, in honest, the gameplay wasn't even a lot there. It was a lot of narrative stuff, like cutscenes. Man, the pictures just don't want to show up today. Oh, that's great. So we get to these things that I basically call, or people basically call chocolate covered broccoli, which is like a quiz wrapped in flowery language. So there's a lot of dialogue where one of the characters will just be like, wow, I didn't understand the concept. Could you repeat it again what it is? And then they'll be like A, B, and C, and it'll be like you're supposed to look for the pathogen. You're supposed to test out which of the pathogens is the worst. You're supposed, like trying to explain to you what the procedures are, what the hypothesis of the experiment you're about to perform is. And it's in just an ABC format. And if you click the wrong one, the robot goes, man, that doesn't sound right. Try again. So again, it's not even like if you get it wrong, you don't even understand why it's wrong. You can just like mindlessly click through all of them and then be like, oh, I got the right answer. Time to hit next kind of deal. So it's just wrapped in flowery language. And the student doesn't even get the benefits of like why quizzes actually do sometimes help learning, where you figure out why the answers are right or wrong. Instead, most students just breeze through this by clicking each answer with no penalty until they get the right one. There are many more of these quizzes in the form of dialogue in the game, and it ultimately doesn't utilize the medium it's in. So if this presentation will give me there we go. The last type of interaction found in these games are point and click adventure segments. Wait, okay, so they're not point and click adventures. There's no adventure in them. They're just point and click. Because what makes point and click adventures fun is like that trial and error component, the puzzle solving that goes into finding what like you need to click, how to combine the things you click, and in what order to do them to advance the narrative or the gameplay. The segments in this game highlight each objective in bright yellow, where you can just follow even if you're basically asleep. So it's not really an adventure when it's just like, click here, okay, now click here, okay, now click here. Like, it's just, it's almost the same as the interactive book parts of the game where it's like, click next to advance, click next to advance. So again, there's no player agency, no interaction, no thought from the player's perspective. You can't make interesting decisions, and there's like, you can't just take interesting actions. It's just basically follow the blinking yellow thing until the end. Nothing learned, nothing gained. These two games show a distinct difference in how we approach educational games. The latter game is an example of putting aesthetics over design and intent, while the former game makes sure the educational content was the one that was focused on and being showcased. When competing for a hyperactive kid's attention, the game we're making needs to be good. If the player doesn't even play the game or isn't interested, then it has no effect in teaching them anything. So, some of the more successful and effective educational media is targeted toward pre-K to 6th grade. There's a larger hole in this type of quality content targeted toward high school level students and just in general higher level education. So this is like partly because in our society, we view fun as like a leisurely hobby at best, or a waste of time at worst. In reality, play is a fundamental part of being human, and it's intrinsically valuable on its own. We play to interact with others in our environment, to learn something new, or to simply find the simple joy in overcoming a challenge. Interactive entertainment is the perfect medium to teach, as it is the only medium where engagement and learning are ingrained in the way it's designed. It forces the audiences to explore every facet of a subject for themselves, rather than it being thrown at them from afar. Without utilizing the power of games, we're wasting a valuable asset in furthering educational practices. Let kids feel cool doing math. Let them feel powerful solving problems. It's fun to learn. Let's make it feel that way. And thank you. I'm Meha Murthy, and that's my email if you want to email me, I guess. Hey.
Thank you. That was a lot. That was a lot of information. That's really interesting. Yay. All right. So does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask Meha about this subject? Yeah, we're all kind of dying. I understand.
Same.
It's last week of school. 2 more days. We're almost there.
And then finals. Woo.
I don't want to think about that. I just need a break. So yeah, you can put questions in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself. Both is fine, whichever you're more comfortable with. Did they did you have to play those games for school, or like how did you come across them? I'm not sure if you said that.
Oh yeah, so the one that I hated, actually I didn't get to play personally, but the kid I was tutoring at the time needed to graduate, and they're like, oh, since you can't take biology over the summer, just play this game. And like it was like a long series of games. Play this game and do these tests, and then it'll count as biology credit. And I was tutoring him through them, and I'm like, oh, this seems interesting. And it wasn't interesting. But now I hear that like in the COVID era, a lot of schools are just like, oh, play this game instead of doing like biology, which like I get it is like the thing you can't do anything on that situation, but like at least if you're gonna like give them a game to play, make the game good, you know?
It's like we have like the alcohol EDU one, right?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember just turning it on and then just leaving my laptop on like while I did other things. So I think that's very similar to some of these educational games.
Mm. Okay. So I guess there's no questions. Well, you covered a lot, so I'm not surprised that there's just nothing to ask, because any question that we already had, you already answered it. Right. So thank you all again for coming. Thank you, Meha, for giving us this talk to finish off our semester. I hope everyone has a lovely rest of the day. Last week of classes, we got this, and then finals, and after that we're done. We get 2 months off. Enjoy them, and I hope to see y'all at some events again next semester. All right, take care.
Bye. Thank you.